gentlemen, Jane Hart.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Vaughan, and thanks to Don for inviting me here today. He asked me to speak on a session, and we talked about what we might do, and he'd given it this grand title of Transforming Organisational Learning, but I hope you're not going to come away from this session thinking that we'd have solved all the problems of the world today. So, but I wanted to kind of give it a bit of a better title, if you like. So I want to call it Small Changes to Modernise the Workplace Learning Experience. And I'll explain what I mean in a minute. As Vaughan has said, I'd like to make it as interactive as possible. They've asked me to sort of include lots of interactivity rather than me just keeping talking all the time. And as it's being live streamed, I hope this means that those people who are watching it from wherever they are in the world can also participate as well. So we're going to be doing a few audience participation things, a few tools just to get some activity going, interactivity going. So what do we mean by modernising the workplace? I think the way I want to look at it today, in terms of the context I want to provide to it, is the way that we personally are learning is changing. And I think anybody who's been affected by the web in whatever way knows that it's impacted their lives in many different ways. Whether it's just going to be able to do the online shopping, it's also had a huge impact on the way we're doing pretty much everything, and certainly the way we're learning. And over the last few years, well, the web's been around, it happens for nearly 25 years now. I don't know if you know that back in March, I think it was 18th this year, it was 25 years since Tim Berners-Lee presented the proposal for the information management system that was going to allow physicists around the world to work together, which became the World Wide Web as we know it. Of course, it was a few years before the first web servers arrived, but since that time, I think a lot of people, most people have been affected by it in some way or other. So for me personally, I've been fortunate to be in the web right from the early days and keeping track of what we've been doing. And over the last 8 years or so, I've been doing a little activity, which some of you may know, called the Top 100 Tools for Learning. And it's in its 8th year now. And what it's allowed me to do is see patterns of how people are using the tools, what they're using them for, and how their learning is changing, how workplace and personal learning is changing. But before I talk a little bit about that, I wanted to get some interaction going straight away. And I wanted to ask you how you have found that the web has changed the way you learn. So what we're going to do is use a tool called Poll Everywhere. And to do that, you can do it in a number of ways. That's going to go. The question is, how has the web changed the way you learn? You can either text your answer to that 020 number. You can tweet it, if you like, tweet at poll, and then use the number 268974 in your message. Or you can use an online web-based version, and the URL is pollev.com/C4LPT. C4LPT. So any of those ways will let you participate in this. And hopefully, all being well, as soon as some responses come in, they'll appear up there. This is where we just hope it all works. So if it's a tweet, we're going to keep quite short, but text message probably quite short as well. It'll take a while to do it. Let me just do something as well to make sure to just test that it's all working okay. Because it's always a good start if things don't work. Here we are. Here we go. That's good. That's working. So things are coming in. No names, or some of them have got names. And you can see how people are already realizing that the way that their learning is changing. Lots of things coming in now. These responses will stay online, so you can take a snapshot of them. Feel free to use your phone for anything here. Take pictures of the images, whatever. Lots of things coming in. So I think we've all agreed that we're all finding that the web has begun to change the way that we're learning everywhere, anytime. Now, you can still continue to do that, and the responses will appear there. Let me just go back to my slides and show you some of the ways I've found that people are learning. Now, for those of you who haven't seen the top 100 tools, I'm going to show you the top 10 that appeared last year, 2013's list. And if you can see those 10 tools on the top, I mean, there were another 90 tools on there. The top was pretty much online social tools, social networking tools. Look, Twitter, number 1, way ahead of everybody else, Facebook, Google Plus, and so forth. These were the tools that people were choosing as top 100 tools, and the contributors were learning professionals from around the world, education, workplace learning. So it wasn't like just anybody, they were people in the learning profession. And it's quite clear that the use of these tools was primarily, or to a great extent, about the way that they were using them for their own professional learning. And it's clear that although they were using them to sort of access courses, having perhaps MOOCs or whatever, that wasn't primarily the way they were using them. In many cases, they were using them to find solutions to their own learning and performance problems. So if they had a problem sitting at their desk, like you probably, where they would go would be to Google or whatever and find a resource, something or other, which probably wasn't a course, but just some sort of resource on the web somewhere or other. But the important thing was that these people didn't want to study the problem. They didn't have to work through a whole course to get the solution to their problem. They just wanted to solve their problem. They didn't want to take a test to find out if they could do whatever it was. They just wanted to do it, and they knew they could do it if they could achieve what they'd set out to do. And thirdly, they didn't need to remember how to do that, the whole task. All they probably needed to remember is where they'd found it or how they could go back and find the information again. So it was changing the way they were accessing and finding useful sources to solve their learning performance problems. So content, the way they're using content was very different. But also, as I pointed out from that list, another considerable factor was that they're now building professional networks. And I guess many people here are already doing the same, putting together trusted networks of friends and colleagues from both inside their organizations as well as outside, and to whom that they could go to if they had a problem or issue or whatever it was. And many people, of course, are calling them personal learning networks because they're often the first port of call for people if they do have a problem. But they're using these networks in many, many ways to just generally converse with them, exchange ideas, brainstorm, keep up to date with what they're going on, learning from them in many ways, and sometimes almost without realizing it. A number of points came out that people were using these tools and they didn't realize they were actually learning things, and suddenly they realized they knew this or they knew somebody could do something else. And so for them, networks, professional networks, were just as important as the content in terms of learning. But together, they're using the web much more to keep up to date with their industry and profession. It's not about perhaps learning old skills or existing skills. It's about learning what I call learning the new, learning about what's happening, what's up to date, what's current, what's happening in their industry and profession. So that I've run through very quickly. If you want to read all about my analysis of the tools, you can go to the website and you'll find a lot of information there about the way people are using these tools. But what I did then was I asked people, well, let's have a look at some of these ways of learning and consider how important or essential they are for you for learning in the workplace. So I listed out like 10 items, starting off with company training and e-learning, and external self-directed study, and using company documents, or then things like knowledge sharing and general conversations, and asked them to rate them. Were they important, not important for them in the workplace as a way to learn, quite important, very important, or essential? And I've run this over a couple of years now, and I've had over 1,000 sort of responses, again, primarily from learning professionals, but not necessarily just from learning people. Now, and again, before I show you the results, I'd like to ask you the same question. And what I'd like to ask you is the first one, which is, to what extent, here we go, let's get this up on the screen, how useful, oh, that's the wrong one, sorry about this. how important or useful is company training or e-learning as a way for you to learn? For you, not for other people, a way for you to learn. How important is it a way for you to learn in the workplace? And this time, you choose one of the answers, and you can either text the code to that number, 020 number, with the code you want, or you can tweet @poll with the code you want, or you can use the poll.ev.com website to do that. And then once we start to bring them in, they'll start appearing on the screen. So we've got, it's actually twisted them around now, unfortunately, so we can't see so much. So we've got quiet at the top, not very essential. So make sure you choose the right one. And as they come in, that will start to change the scores that are happening here. So, okay, so it seemed to have stabilized a bit there. Let's have a look. We've got 15 people said quite important, not important, 12, very important, 7, and only essential, 6. Okay, so probably the biggest one here is quite and not. And let's have a look at our results from our audience, they're not our audience, from our 750, 900 odd people. Very, very similar. Look at that result. 37% of people, that's like a third of respondents only thought that training and e-learning was very important, essential. 2/3 thought it was not important or only quite important. What do you think of that? I'll show you the results in the next one. You know, in terms of self-directed study, obviously considered a bit more. I've added the last two columns together, as you can see, to get the sort of overall picture, really. And you can see that company documents and internal job aids will sort of middling, really, but not that essential. So what about the next one, which is knowledge sharing? Let's have a look and see what you think about that one. How important, the question is going to be, how important or valuable is knowledge sharing in your team as a way of learning in the workplace for you personally? Not for anybody else in your organization, but for you personally. And once again, we've got codes and polls and whatever, different ways to do it, to respond. Oops, nobody said not important. Look, 23 out of, I don't know how many we've got in here now, 30, 40 people have responded, and that there. 40, it stopped it at 40 at the moment, just so we can kind of capture it. So 40 people, and vast majority said essential. Well, what do you guess? That's exactly what the picture showed here. 87% of respondents from over 900 participants from 46 countries said the same thing as well. They felt that knowledge sharing in the team was the most essential and very important part of the way they learn in the workplace. And in fact, you know, looking at the other things, general conversations and meetings, personal and professional networks, again, very highly rated compared to the other things I've just shown to you. When it comes to things like external blog and news feeds, 65% there thought blogging and news feeds were important. The things about keep abreast of the new, and 59% content curation. And I'll leave this one, web searching, Googling or whatever, 81% said it was essential. So you can see the key things that people are thinking are important for their learning. This is how they want to learn. This is how they prefer to learn, in these ways that are marked up in the blue. So what I'm finding when I go around to organizations is that when they have to then go back and get training or e-learning, I'm afraid they're getting rather frustrated about it. And in fact, I hear all stories about how that they are trying to find a way around it all. Rather than sit there and do this stuff, they're finding all excuses not to do it. And in some cases, they're actually paying their children to do it for them. in most cases, that's compliance training. The 2-hour compliance training where you're not allowed to, you've got to sit there for 2 minutes on that screen. I'm afraid that's reality. They're paying their children, or else they've got it on the... My son-in-law told me he just sat with his finger on the screen like that, not watching it. So these were my findings, and I think they're pretty devastating in some ways. And Towards Maturity brought out a report fairly recently called The Learner Voice. I don't know if you read it. It's a downloadable resource. And they asked learners how they learned as well, and they came up with some strikingly interesting results, fairly similar results. Here's one that asked, are L&D tuned into the learner voice? And I'm just going to highlight 2 things. For instance, 23% of L&D agree that learners have the confidence to manage their own learning and development. Well, quite low, but they don't think they can do it, most L&D people, whereas 88% thought that they were likely to learn at their own pace. And this one here, 84% were willing to use technology to share, as we've just talked about. Only 18% of L&D agree that people know how to do it. So we've got this disconnect, really, about the way we've always done things, the way we think we need to do them, and the way that people are now learning and working. So this was the context in which I wanted to think about change. How we can kind of modernize workplace learning so that it's perhaps much more in line with the way that people are learning for themselves. And when I talk about change, I don't necessarily mean about large-scale change. I'm not talking about great, huge change management initiatives, where you bring somebody in and then everybody has to be changed. That's not the way I like to work, and it's not the way many organizations are beginning to think about change now. And in fact, Ewan Semple has a good way of putting it. He calls it the Trojan mice. He tells you to unleash your Trojan mice. So instead of having your large-scale change initiatives, have lots of small ones. Things that don't require a lot of budget, things that you can work away and do together. So not great big impact, big noise stuff. Now, in fact, Ewan, although he refers to it in that book, which is a great read, it was somebody called Peter Freiherr actually probably first coined the term Trojan mouse. And he said there were small, well-focused changes which are introduced on an ongoing basis in an inconspicuous way. So they're quite little changes that we can do without making this big noise. So I wanted us to think today about what small changes we could make, what Trojan mice we could unleash in organizations, in your organization, that will make an impact, that will begin to make that changed, modernizing workplace learning. So that's a big question. So to hone it down a little bit, let me give you 6 features of the way I think learning has changed or is changing, or individual personal learning is changing, and that'll give us a much tighter context to think about that. So the first thing that I noticed, and I think it's come out in a number of keynotes because David Price talked about this, is the concept of autonomy. People like to have choice. They like to be in control. It's a huge motivator. Dan Pink's written about it. So many people write about the importance of autonomy. Now, that doesn't mean we've got to just let everybody get on and do their own thing, but I think it does mean we need to think about how we can begin to support more autonomous ways of learning, how we can support people to do things and have some choice about what they do, so that they haven't all got to be regimented and do things in the way that we direct them to do, which is the way we've traditionally done it. How can we introduce some smaller ways of allowing autonomy in what we do? And the second thing I've noticed is that we tend to have, our interactions tend to be small, and we tend to spend our time in very short sort of bite-sized pieces of information. So everything's gone small, whereas our training tends to be days-long workshops or huge online courses. But in our own personal learning, we tend to do things very small bits of information, content, small interactions with people, nothing huge. So the question is, how can we enable sort of shorter learning experiences? And the third one is that for many people, as we've seen, it's become much more continuous learning. As we know, workplace learning has tended to be training, which is event-based, lots of events, but online, in our networks, on the web, we have this sort of continuous drip feed of learning, of knowledge and information coming to us. We might not even be realizing it, but we're sort of moving on. So how can we start to encourage more ongoing approaches to learning, rather than just think them as very sort of event-based, short interactions that we create from time to time? And the other feature is that we now have access to on-demand learning. We saw people coming up with that, on-demand learning. People can access things when they need them, and they can find what they want. So how can we kind of support that learning at the point of need? And the fifth one is about social. People, as we know, much more social. And by social, I don't mean to say that they're sitting in the same room discussing something with somebody in real time, or even in a classroom or online classroom discussing things and learning from one another in real time. It's about people learning from one another, from the interactions and things they've shared with one another. But traditionally, workplace learning has been about the authoritative voice. You know, we tell you what you need to know, and then you get on with it. We're not really interested in your views, and we don't really value the sharing that takes place. So how do we balance that need when we do need sometimes to tell people things with the opportunities that we can support more knowledge sharing? And then finally, what's become clear is that learning now is, for many people, is not something that just happens in a classroom or in an online course. It happens anywhere, at any time, on any device. Whether we're sitting in a conference session, whether we're on the train, wherever we are, we're learning. And the question is, and how can we start to encourage more anywhere learning? Not necessarily with formal learning on a device, but how can we encourage people to think about the way that they're learning all the time when perhaps they're not even in the workplace? So there's 6 things there to sort of focus our minds on. So what I want to spend some time doing in a minute is thinking about what changes we can make to make a difference. How can we make things more autonomous, smaller, more ongoing, more on-demand? They're not necessarily all going to happen across the board. So perhaps we might you might want to take some sort of event, so like face-to-face training. You might think, face-to-face training, how could we make face-to-face training more autonomous? What could we do? Or how can we make it smaller? How can we make it more continuous? How can we make it available on demand? What could we do? What small things could we do to make a difference along that spectrum? Or you might think online learning. How can we make online learning more autonomous or smaller or continuous, on demand? And you might even think, not interested in those, what new things or different things can we do? How would they support one of these type of features? So that's going to be your task for the next 15 or so minutes, and then we'll have a look at what you're doing. Now, to make life easier, I hope, we're going to use an online corkboard, bulletin board, whatever you like. And I'm going to use one called Padlet, as it happens. And it's a corkboard, and you can stick your ideas onto this corkboard. Now, to get to it, I've shortened the URL down. So remember this, because you'll need this to get to it, because it's going to disappear in a minute, because I'm going to show you the real thing. bit.ly/big difference. bit.ly/big difference. And I've tested this. It works on laptops, mobiles, phones. It's a bit small on phones, but you'll find a way to get there. It works on iPads a treat. And what it gives is gives us a blank canvas on which to put some thoughts so that we can gather your thoughts all together from this room and from outside the room. And what you need to do is you simply just double-click anywhere on the corkboard, and a little sticker will appear. And what would be great if you where it says write something, you write your suggestion, but you also put your name in here, and also you identify which feature you think it would help with. So I put them along the top, A for autonomy, B for small, C for continuous, D for on demand, and so forth. And then you can also put a link in as well. If you know a nice resource that sums up your thinking, you could put the link in there as well. So here's one I put in earlier, Good Blue Peter style. My suggestion was, don't require people to turn off their smartphones in face-to-face training, but integrate them. So, you know, one of the big bugbears of people when they go to training is they have to turn their phones off, because the trainers think that's going to make them focus. But why not allow them to use them, to take photos and make notes or whatever it is. That way they can start to engage in the way that they're used to. They have their phones with them all the time. Well, why not actually integrate them into the session, like I'm trying to do today? Make it a feature of way of discussions and so forth. It might work with small groups and big groups, but it's one possibility. So let's get started. All you've got to do, as I say, is just double-click anywhere. If you want to delete it, there's a little delete button. If you want to find any more about how to do it, Get Help on the right-hand side talks about some formatting and stuff as well, you know, how you can put different bits and pieces and making it bold or whatever you want to do, numbered lists. But just try and think of one thing. If everybody just thought of one tiny thing that they could do to make a difference, that related to one of these features, making things more autonomous or small or continuous, on demand, and posted it on there. And that'll be available after this event for us all to look at. Now, it's unmoderated at the moment, so I don't know what's going to happen here. I'll go through it afterwards and check everything's okay. But it's open. Otherwise, if we try to moderate it now, you know, slow things down. So just try and put something in. We'll have a bit of a pause, bit of quiet, and then give you some time. If you haven't got a device, try and find somebody who has. Buddy up. Great. Most people seem to have something in their hands, so that's good. If you haven't got one, find somebody. If you want to bring it up to me, I'll put it in for you. But we'll have a bit of downtime, 10, 15 minutes. So I'm going to shut up for a while and let you get on with it. Okay, thanks for doing that. There's a tremendous amount of stuff there. I think we probably need time just to go through it individually and make some sense out of it. There's lots of ideas there. I recently ran an online symposium when I asked the question, and we discussed with a number of people exactly this question, and I've got 20 ideas to share with you. So if you're happy, I'll do that for 20 minutes there. There's a lot I could say about each one, so it'll be like 20 ideas in 20 minutes. Can you bear with that? It's going to be quite fast-paced. But feel free to continue using this if you like. And I think a lot of some of the ideas I've noticed have already been said here, so we're going to see some similarity. So these were some of the things that I came up with others. The first one I've already mentioned to you, which was asking people not to turn off their smartphones. People are so used to having them on their person, they feel like they've lost something if they go to the session and they're asked to turn them off. So why not make a virtue out of them and include them, even if it's just for private note-taking? That's one valid reason. Clearly, we don't want people making phone calls, but I mean, you know, for using them for videos and pictures and taking important resources. That way they can begin to focus and engage with the content and stuff rather than just having to sit there, especially in a presentational type training event. And you can actually start to integrate them, as I've shown here. The second one I put on the board was don't require people to work through or complete an online course. It doesn't mean anything. Course completion, as we know, don't mean anything anymore. It's about what people can do. So provide them with performance tests, perhaps up front, which, you know, if they can pass those, if they can do whatever they need to do, then why do they actually need to take a course? Or if they do, provide them with access to the bits they need to do. But it really is this pressing the next button, which unfortunately has caused a lot of the frustrations that I frequently hear about. So the autonomy is to be able to make use of those resources, those courses, in the way that suits them, not having to be told to go through it in a very prescribed way. The third one is about including informal content in online courses. Now, not about informal learning, because that's a different aspect together, but I'm thinking about, we have these very stylish, sophisticated-looking courses which are made up of really much more sort of expert-created content, internal created content. There's such a valuable range of information in blog posts and videos and stuff. So start to build that in, perhaps make things less sort of stylish and screen-based, but more like web pages and activities that people are used to moving around. And yet social in as much as we're using resources that perhaps explain or demonstrate or talk about or give another view on ideas from the topic under question. Fourth one is provide opportunities for social interaction in online courses. Now, that's becoming more popular. Most people call that social learning, but in my view, that's not really what social learning is all about. But nevertheless, people are building it in. But I think if you're going to introduce social interaction, it's got to be done in a very careful way. It's not about making people be social. I don't believe you can do that, not enforcing them, not believing that by participating in a course, by contributing that they are learning. Often the people who aren't contributing are learning more than the people that are actually vociferous in a course. So make social something that is positive, something people want to do, rather than something that is enforced. The fifth one is, I saw this one come up, extend the life of your course, pre-stuff, post-stuff, communities around your resources and communities around your courses so that they have a life. They will have a shelf life. They won't go on forever, and it doesn't matter if they don't go on forever, but at least you're providing support. Even ask SMEs to think about not just designing content, but design the support for what they're going to deliver or what's going to be delivered post-course, post-face-to-face training, or how peers can support one another in some community after they go back to the workplace. And again, don't think of it just as something that has to be managed all the time. Perhaps even the group can take responsibility for it themselves. And it will die off, the need will go, and so it should be allowed to gradually fade away. It's not something that has to be made to endure for ages and ages. The next one is where the social interaction. Why not use your enterprise social network instead of your LMS to do that? Many organizations are introducing Yammer and Jive and Socialcast and all these ones, and they offer a great opportunity for people to create a group there where social is really the key to it all, and the content is there just to support it. You've got the activity stream, the flow of discussion, and you've got the resource base to put the content, if you need to, perhaps in a more informal way. All the online workshops I run are done in this sort of way. We don't use a traditional learning management system which constrains thinking about what learning looks like and has to be tested and focus on course completions. But it's a much more social experience about people joining and participating as they want, talking with one another, connecting with others, and getting out of it what they want, putting into it whatever they need to do to get what they need out of it. So it's a much more autonomous approach to social learning in a more formal, but in a sort of semi-structured way. I called it guided social learning, that one. This one, where we all talk about this one nowadays, don't assume this course is the only solution to a problem. Think about it as the last solution, if you like. After you've been through all the other things, only think of course as if everything else fails. ABC, that's Harold Jarkey, my colleague's answer to it all. Anything but courses. Number 8, don't expect people to have to remember things from training. How many times have we, ped them in and they forget everything? There's the good old Ebbinghaus learning curve we've all seen. After 30 days, we only remember 20% of what we've heard in a course. So don't make people rely on memory. Give them things. If you're going to provide them performance support, give it to them in the training, allow them to do the training, so they've got the resources they need after the training. They haven't got to remember where they read that in the manual, on what page, and so forth. Number 9, don't trap resources in an LMS. Make them available from a portal or learning center for anytime access. This one, people are doing this all the time now. on-demand resources. You get them when you want them. There's no course completion required. It's just there is some light tracking of who's using what, just so we can see what's popular. But the idea is there. You can use it, can make use of it as and when you want. You just dip in, dip out. You don't have to work through the whole thing if you don't want to. And it's easy to sort of have it just available for one click rather than having to log in and be Big Brother looking at what you're using, and well, you didn't actually make your way through the whole of that course, did you? Approach. So much more informal approach to providing access. Number 10, build a community of practice instead of a course. Well, if that works well, if you've got a sort of continuous learning problem, people need to constantly learn. People like sales teams or whatever that need to constantly find out about things. It's not just at a one-off event when they need to know one particular thing. They constantly need to know things. Building communities of practice, again, is becoming pretty standard way of dealing with training issues. Number 11, run lunch and learns and other informal group sessions. Now, these ideally should be informal sessions where people can come together, just discuss things on a very informal basis. Nothing very structured or nothing very organized about them, just sort of pop-up learning. I saw appear on one of the comments. Exactly that. People just come and be voluntary. I've heard about this. Jane Bozak shared an example the other day. She said a colleague of hers was forced to go to a lunch and learn session on motivation. I think it sort of misses the point, really. And if you can't have them in person, then why not do them online? Some picture here, you might recognize Sam here. I don't think he's in, I think he's doing a session himself. Or is he in here? I don't know. This is a session we had at the eLearning Network a few years ago. We all came together and we had live chat with people from outside the group as well. And it was just an informal session where people just come together and talk about, and this way we were talking about informal learning has happened, but it could be on any topic. But rather than thinking we're just about creating formal training activities, why not coordinate an ongoing series of learning activities? One of the organizations I work with through their Yammer network, they have a constant flow, a constant stream of sort of short activities. They might be a one-day challenge to do something or other. It might be a week on, I don't know, using a particular tool or something. But lots of events that people can come in and out of. And what's more, they're not just delivered by the training people. People sign up to actually facilitate or offer a subject on any topic. So it's about people coming together. So have a sign-up sheet where you can kind of say, I'd like to offer a session on X, Y, Z. And it might be something completely unrelated to work. It doesn't have to be a work topic, but a whole going series of different events that make things perhaps a bit more fun, more interesting. And actually, it's in these kind of events you can start to bring in your sort of Trojan mice and introduce them, rather than put them into your more formal events when people are expecting to see some sort of course structure. But these you can start to initiate your online chats or your using the technology and the mobile technology and so forth. And people then say, well, why can't we have these in our formal training activities? And so that's the way to move them in. So their ongoing series of activities become very popular. More and more people actually just want, because it's autonomous, because they have the choice, they want to do it. And by wanting to do it, they're finding out about different ways that learning and training can actually take place. This is one I came up with fairly recently. If you've been reading my blogs, I called it a learning flow. And the idea is that on a daily basis, you inject, or daily or regular basis anyway, you inject a short, what I call a social micro-learning activity into a team's workflow. So it might be like a tweet, if you like, which consists of, say, here's something to read, what do you think about it, now share it. And it might just take the total of, say, 15 minutes to do it, but it's a drip feed of perhaps more structured approach to injecting some learning activity into the workflow. Some people respond to it, it's up to them if they do. Some people might respond to one, participate in another, not be bothered about another one. That's not important. Again, it's just a small piece continuously injected in. And for the places where we've been doing it, it's actually been quite successful. Encourage and support social mentoring. Mentoring is normally a sort of top-down driven exercise where we decide who's going to be mentored by whom. But social mentoring is people coming together and choosing their own mentors. And they're for small projects they could be. They might be, you know, I've just got to do this task. I need to do a project management task. I don't know anything about project management. If somebody can come and mentor me for kind of a few days or a week or whatever it might be. So what some organizations are using their social platforms, their enterprise social networks, for people to sort of ask questions, can someone help me? And other places say, I'm available for mentoring on X, Y, Z. And people find their own mentors, buddy up for very small projects, might be for ongoing mentoring, but it's not necessarily a sort of top-down, organized activity which is managed and coordinated by the Learning and Development Department. And then 16, encourage and support independent learning. I think from, you know, a lot of the work I've done, many learning development departments think people's learning outside the organization is either irrelevant or is some sort of threat to the work they do. But I think, and I've helped them to understand that I think that's really important that they do that, because then they can feed in what they're learning back into the organization. And the organization needs to constantly be aware of new ideas and new activities and new resources. So this is one way of doing it, of encouraging people to do it. But perhaps giving them time to do it, but by ensuring that they kind of bring it back in, if you like, and help and building the organizational capabilities and understanding of new things. And it might be that an organization, L&D, needs to play some sort of what I call a learning concierge type of approach, where they need to help identify people on places and resources and sources to do this. But I think even better exercise is to actually help them build the new skills, because now that people are going out and finding all this stuff, they are developing a whole new skill set, and the people have been out on the web doing that, and now, you know, growing their networks, building a professional resource base, they're curating, they're extracting the learning, they're dealing with information overload, they're recording it, they're building a professional brand, and they're learning out loud. They're talking to other people about what they're learning. So these are the new learning skills that people are now acquiring, and building those internally, I think, is going to be important, because we can't continue to give everybody everything they need. All we can do is help people to do things for themselves. And it's particularly to help teams to work out loud. So it's not just about learning out loud what they're talking about, but working out loud, talking about what they're doing. And those kind of small initiatives, on a very day-to-day basis, talking about small projects they've been in, the projects they've been in, the activities they've done. Actually, last week was Working Out Loud Week. And if you're on Twitter, if you go and have a look at, well, if you just typed in Working Out Loud, I'm sure you come up with the hashtag stream. Somebody, I'm sure, will put it into our stream if you're looking for it there. And it was about what organizations are doing. And around the world, Working Out Loud is becoming bigger and bigger. And people are using it to teams to talk to one another about what they're doing. Last two, a bit more generic. Don't try and track everyone's learning. You know, we always think we want to be in control of it. We can't possibly do it. The only place that learning takes place in the brain. All we can do is encourage it and support it and kind of facilitate it. So I think our role moves away from managing it and controlling it to just trying to encourage it and support it. And finally, I think you hear about this all the time. We've had a whole chat session on this. We should start to think about people as staff or workers or employees, people even, not just learners, because learning is only one thing they do in the job. Their real job is working. That's the core business. So thinking about learning, we bring in all these old ideas about classrooms and training, which we're trying to sort of move away from here. My colleague Harold talks about learning is the work, work is learning, and that's what we've got to think. These things are so tightly integrated, embedded, that by talking about learning, we're kind of separating it out as a separate activity, when in fact it really is a key and important part of learning. So we're coming towards the end now. Start small, pick up some of these ideas, pick your battles, don't try and enforce ideas that people don't want to do. And if you have any problems, just describe them as pilots. It works. So thank you very much for your participation in the board here. That will continue, oops, it's moved off, continue to be there. Please feel free to add anything into it, add any links, and anyone can come in and have a look at it. I'll make sure it's all moderated before we move on. if anyone has any question, we've got 2 or 3 minutes left. If anyone has a question, not particularly for me, but for anybody in the audience, for anything they picked up on here that they would like anyone to talk about, now's your opportunity before we go. You like that? Yeah, I love that. I think this whole thing is being streamed, but I'll put it on my website for you. Put it on SlideShare for you. And if you want to delve into it deeper, there's all those sort of links and resources that support it, and that's on the website as well. Actually, that is in a new area I've set up called Modern Workplace Learning, where I've kind of aggregated all my workshops and stuff and activities and resources and the books that I've written and stuff. And that's the URL up there. So, you know, there might be something that you'd like to find there for free stuff as well as sort of paid for stuff. Well, there's not so much interactivity towards the end, but hopefully there was some there to show you that you can do these things, even in a big room like this. And so thank you very much for making it all possible. I was a bit worried it wasn't going to work, but it did. So thank you very much.